Rethink, for those of you who maybe don't know, we're the charity that's focused on younger women and breast cancer. So we have a mission to educate young women about risk reduction and being breast aware, but we also run support programs for younger women that are dealing with breast cancer. So women that are diagnosed in their 20s, 30s, and early 40s. We're there with practical support, emotional support, and Breast Fest, which is what SCAR Project is a part of, is one of our flagship programs, and it's really about educating the public, but it's also amazing support for all the young women that are dealing with breast cancer and other women dealing with breast cancer that come out to get educated themselves and be part of the dialogue. That's really what Breast Fest is all about. It's creating community and having important conversations that we, as an organization that's rethinking breast cancer, feel need to be out there. So really, thank you so much for being here, and Alison's going to say a little bit about the SCAR project.
Yeah, exactly. So again, thanks everyone for coming. We met Katrina, I think, how long was that? Almost a year ago, was it, in April? When we were screening, there's a documentary that if everyone can see, it's an amazing documentary called Bearing It All, which is about the making of the SCAR project. And that's when we met Katrina, and we were very lucky that she agreed to go for coffee with us and help one of the many people who we roped into helping us with this exhibit and the work that we wanted to do around it. We had first screened this film, Bearing It All, at Breast Fest a few years ago, and we were so impressed with David J, the photographer, and the SCAR project that we decided, okay, we have got to bring the SCAR project up to Toronto. And for us, as MJ said, our organization is focused on young women with breast cancer. So this exhibit for us means so many things, which I won't get into because I think people are going to talk about it, but particularly just that young women are represented and that it shows the truth about breast cancer, or sort of beyond what we typically see out there, but I won't go down that path, which might be more about pink ribbons or feather boas or, this runs and walks, and you, with the SCAR project, are seeing a deeper reality. And so that is why we really wanted to bring the exhibit up, but we also wanted to do nights like tonight because we felt that the SCAR project affords the opportunity to have a conversation about issues beyond just even breast cancer. And that was really important to us because we feel that there's so many issues like the one we're going to talk about tonight around beauty and body image that the SCAR project touches on. So I'm going to turn it over to Katrina, and I'll just tell, for those of you who don't know our Katrina, just like her quick bio, she doesn't like her bio being read, but we've been able to narrow it down to a few words. So Katrina's the author of 2 novels, which you all must go and buy. The Giller-nominated Everybody Has Everything and How to Be Happy. Her nonfiction writing on arts and culture has appeared in the Globe and Mail, the New York Times Magazine, which is like so wicked, and Toronto Life. She's currently an executive at CBC TV, and I want to thank all the panelists, and Katrina will introduce them, so thank you, everyone.
Thank you all for coming at the end of your long work days. And I wanted to thank Michelle and Alison and MJ for inviting me to be here and for all of your hard work that you've done to bring this event and all the Breast Fest events to Toronto. Thank you so much. So last year I was invited to a screening of this documentary about these photos. And I have to admit I was a little bit wary. If not quite cynical, I'd maybe become a bit numb to breast cancer as an issue. Burnt out on pink washing and very much in league with Barbara Ehrenreich's comment, I'm not that terrified of dying, but I am terrified of dying with a big teddy bear under my arm. But I did watch this kind of remarkable documentary, and that film and these pictures were very, very different. The experience of the disease, the confidence, the heartbreak, the realness of these women being photographed, it was very riveting. I highly recommend this film as a great accompaniment to these photos. So in our daily lives, women's bodies are everywhere, and often they're in pieces, right? The boobs, the butts, segmented female body. But I think that these bodies, scarred and missing parts, actually feel more full. They feel more real than most of the female bodies that we see every day. So I'm pleased to be here today to facilitate a conversation about the meaning of these photos and how they challenge our notions of beauty and why they matter. To have this discussion, we're very lucky to have these three esteemed bright minds here to talk. This is Jennifer McWhirter. She is a PhD candidate at the University of Waterloo, specializing in the area of visual health communication, mass media, and health. Just a perfect match for this discussion. Sarah Liss, in the middle, is a writer, cultural critic, and editor at The Grid, and the author of, most recently, of the book Army of Lovers, A Community History of Will Monroe. And over there, Cameron Williamson, publishing veteran, former art director at Chatelaine, editor of Glow, worked at the Globe, and as of a few months ago, he's the, weeks?
5 weeks.
5 weeks, okay. The new editor of Flair, and I believe the first male editor-in-chief of Flair magazine.
Yes, correct.
Okay, so thank you guys. All
Thank you.
right, first question. What are your impressions of these photos? Are they beautiful? How do they make you feel?
Well, I would say that when I looked up the word beautiful in the dictionary, which of course I know what beautiful means, but words like generally pleasing, fetching, pretty, lovely came up. I don't think that those are actually the right ways I would describe these images. To me, they're alluring and arresting, but more importantly, they're raw and they're real. They stop you in your tracks.
Right. Well, and I think what we see of beauty and what we understand of beauty as shorthand in pop culture especially, we tend to see very idealized images. We see images that are disconnected from kind of the reality, the warts and all experiences that bodies go through. And often, and you know, I'm thinking now of just the other day, the singer Lorde posted a photo of herself in response to an airbrushed photo that had appeared on stage, and you could see that she had blemishes on her skin. You could see that she had circles under her eyes, and the fact that, you know, within seconds, someone can post an airbrushed photo that is more conventionally beautiful, you know, online, without having to go through kind of acrobatics, kind of gives you a sense of what we're accustomed to seeing and reading as reality. Whereas I look at these photos and I can think, no, this is actually, I think Cameron's right in that our understanding, or the, you know, our understanding of beauty does kind of dwell on that superficial level of fetching or pleasing to the eye, whereas this is something that kind of grabs you from within and I think speaks to a larger, kind of more poetic, more age-old idea of beauty.
Yeah, I think building on what Sarah was saying, images like this can kind of help us remind us that things that we might standardly consider to be flaws can be beautiful and can be perceived as beautiful. The whole person can be perceived as beautiful, and beauty includes difference, and I think that beauty wouldn't even exist without the difference, because how can we perceive one thing as beautiful if something doesn't look different to it? And so I think that these images can speak to that really well.
I was just going to say, I think also aesthetically, I mean, one of the great things about this project is, you know, when we do see bodies with scars, or bodies that don't necessarily conform to our idea of conventional, idealized beauty, they're often pathologized. They're often shot in ways that are less than flattering.
Yes.
I feel like the lighting in these photos is stunning. These are, you know, these are photos that were shot with an eye to composition. These weren't subjects who were shot because they're victims or they're pathologized or they're ill. They're not represented that way. They're represented as, you know, subjects with agency. If you look at them, they're looking at you, and you can see that there's a story and personality in all of these photos, which is also something that's quite stunning and we're not used to. I mean, I think that we're often used to seeing this in documentary photography, but to have them presented in this way as a gallery of portraits is really, it's quite stunning.
And just the individuality of each woman. I mean, I think when you put a pink t-shirt on every breast cancer survivor, or anyone that's struggling with it or going through it or going through chemotherapy, there's kind of like this sameness that kind of happens. And it's like wrapping yourself up in just this pink, fuzzy kind of image. Whereas this, it's like they're showing their scars, they're owning them. So there's just something much more powerful for me in seeing this.
Well, so when we were walking around, you were talking also about the eye contact and the kind of agency and actually looking these women in the eye. And I think that's true. That's that individualization and differentiation from this kind of mass movement, you know, the breast cancer awareness movement, this big pink ribbon, which of course we have respect for and don't mean to diminish in any way when we're talking critically about this. So I did want to say that. But that is actually my next question. It's about the context for these images, you know, in the world of pink ribbons and pink teddy bears. And, you know, how do you see these pictures? And you sort of alluded to this, but Jennifer, maybe you would want to speak to that because it's an area that you have studied. How do these pictures talk back to our kind of current cultural depictions of breast cancer?
I think it's really interesting because a lot of the images around breast cancer in the media now are happy and pretty and pink, and they're usually very young women, they're usually white women, and this isn't necessarily breast cancer. This doesn't kind of represent the diverse experiences that breast cancer involves. And when we kind of think about that, and then think about how this is how we're portraying a very serious disease, a disease that can take people's lives, and our kind of cultural obsession with beauty and appearance, especially for women, has even infiltrated like our most terrifying moments in life. And it's very interesting how it's so powerful that it's even moved into how we convey images of health in the media. And I think it's good that we have had that kind of positive display of what breast cancer is, because there used to be so much taboo around breast cancer that women would often not even disclose to their family members sometimes that that's the disease that they had. They would be ostracized, and they just couldn't share it in the way that you can now. And so I think having those really positive images have kind of, it's helped to swing the pendulum in one direction. And now that we've had that, we need to kind of have things like the SCAR project to bring us back to a more centered place where we kind of are recognizing it for how serious it is and what it really looks like.
Right, so maybe that's pink ribbon and ink being sort of laying the foundation for us to be able to look at images like this in context. What about you guys? How do you see it?
I mean, I kind of think what happens if you're used to seeing anything too often, you get kind of fatigued. So I think, you know, by having sort of these similar sort of pink ribbon ceremonies and runs and charity runs where everything's, and the images that are very similar with the pink, and so suddenly you might even stop forgetting what it's linked up to if you've seen it often enough. And it becomes something that's just kind of normalized. So this kind of, I think, draws attention back to it in a way that's arresting. And, you know, I think probably images like this 20 years ago, and I think this was another question that we're going to talk about later, but I do think that they would exist, but they'd probably be in some like outskirts of a city in some small gallery. But now with social media, I think these can actually reach just the same amount of people as a pink ribbon campaign could, but have much more of a lasting impact. And so I think they're very necessary.
Right, or they'd be in a medical context, you know?
Exactly.
As something for women who are going through the
Yeah,
procedure.
absolutely.
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 Yeah, Sarah, did you?
Well, and I think that there's been important as well that integrating scars and integrating injury, integrating, you know, alterations as part of whole, real bodies, and particularly female bodies, I think. I mean, obviously, breast cancer is so loaded, and so loaded in our culture because it affects breasts, which are very loaded symbols, which are a center of femininity. And I think, you know, in the same way that I feel like there's a certain narrative that can evolve out of kind of pink watching and the pink ribbon campaign, where there's this impetus to just communicate hope and just communicate positivity. I feel like there's also kind of this thrust to be a good breast cancer, a person with breast cancer, person living with breast cancer survivor in some way. You know, kind of just to fall in line and to not show your scars, but to present to the world in a way that is polished and kind of that erases the experiences you've gone through. And I feel like, again, to kind of look at this gallery of photos and to understand the many, many, many different ways in which breast cancer can affect someone, the different choices that women make around their breasts, the different relationships that women have with their breasts, and the ways in which they kind of, especially, I mean, I was struck by the ways in which, reading some of the stories, women kind of re-engaged with their experience of gender after experiencing breast cancer.
and developed new relationships with the breast, decided that no, they wanted to have a full mastectomy because that was the thing that would make them feel the most empowered and the most whole, or vice versa.
Well, I mean, is there such a thing as these pictures becoming too normalized? If we start seeing, if we see a lot of these kinds of images, can we become kind of deadened to them, or are we engaging in something almost prurient by looking at these images and feeling our feelings? What do you think about that idea? Is that the goal, or should we always be somewhat shocked because we need to really feel the impact of this disease?
I mean, I think you do need to feel shocked at some point because, like I said, I think you have to shock yourself out of sort of the sameness that's being presented out there with cancer. So this is interesting, but there is the risk of something becoming overly trendy. So, there's a trend right now in advertising and a lot of magazines about authenticity. And the Dove campaign is a good example, the Real Beauty and Dove campaign, where that's now a marketing tool, right? And even American Eagle Outfitters, which is an American clothing company, they've started in their recent campaign using models that have tattoos, and they make a point of saying these images have not been photoshopped as a part of their campaign. So it's interesting to sort of see. And even there was a recent fashion show in the US for the retailer Lane Bryant that used plus-size models, and all the fashion editors went and it was applauded. So you see these things happening. So I think there definitely is a shift right now in advertising to kind of show images that aren't blonde hair, blue eyes, conventionally pretty. But I do think there is a risk that if suddenly everyone starts doing this, it could become tiresome.
Right, like do atypical
Exactly.
versions of beauty become
Yes.
commodified, and then they lose that.
Yeah, but I think it's important that this is happening now, and that I feel like it's extreme enough that it actually will have an impact. Like it still stands out for me from like the other examples that I've given.
Right.
as
offering a different kind of point of view.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think at this point, for a lot of people, these images might be shocking. I don't know if it matters if they become not shocking. Yeah. I think that might be okay if people are kind of they're sort of okay with seeing scars and the reality of what diseases can do to the human body. But I think one of the important things the SCAR project does is we're not just seeing the physical realities, but we're seeing the human suffering behind the disease, and we're seeing the emotion in women's faces. And I think even if we kind of get used to these kinds of images, when you really look into someone's eyes in these portraits, you can still see you can sort of feel what some of it is that they're experiencing. Mm-hmm. I think that will always be there.
Right, yeah, the story is front and center.
Yeah, no, I was just going to echo that, and I think the sense of narrative is important. I mean, another thing that I think you get when you look at these photos is that there is a sense of trust between the photographer and the subjects of the photos. But I think kind of further to what Cameron was saying, I think, the tipping point will kind of be when, there's a casting call for models with scars, and
yes.
It's just like here we're taking this thing that here is actually about a narrative and a story, and it's there's a symbolism to the scars that all of these women have on their bodies because they speak to a larger experience. Whereas once it becomes reduced to just an aesthetic choice or this connotation of realness and grittiness, then I think the meaning kind of disappears behind it, and you're looking at, it's a kind of exploitative aesthetic.
Because trends pass.
Yeah.
So if it comes into fashion, and it can just as easily go out of fashion. Mm-hmm. That's interesting. Here's one for you, Cameron. Since we're talking about beauty standards and the kinds of the ways in which women internalize these conventional notions of beauty, the fashion industry is obviously under constant scrutiny for conveying these unattainable images of beauty, and that the 18-year-old or less, hairless, skinny, white, beyond able-bodied, super-bodied.
Like not human.
Yeah, exactly, not really human. And I know this is I have worked in this world too, and I love fashion and all this. So are we going to see change in this industry, and how do you sort of reconcile the dominant mode of fashion with, you know, your own
Yes, for sure.
curiosity and
You know,
sexual
it's,
conscience.
yeah, I'm like, I knew this question was going to be directed to you.
I
No, it's fine,
know,
it's fine.
sorry.
No, it's
5
good.
weeks of
It's
work.
good. No. I've been worked in the fashion industry for 15 years, so I'm used to these kinds of questions and conversations. But the problem is, before I start defending the whole industry, and I'm not going to, because there are parts of it that are crazy, and there are things that I don't know if they're going to change. But what I will say is that as things change in trends, like everything, even models and the type of representation of women does change. So if you think of, like, you know, the flapper era, there was a very particular body type was in style. And then in the 60s, it was like Twiggy, and it was like the waif, and then it was like the 70s, and the 80s, it got more athletic with models. Then the 90s got wafy again with Kate Moss and grungy. And so, but we've really been stuck in this, I would say, a few decades now of this like rail skin, almost boyish, prepubescent body that isn't going anywhere. What is changing, though, is, and thankfully, is that it's not just all Caucasian. It's like actually now starting to be opened up. Like we're seeing more models that are South Asian and Asian and African, but I worry at that time still whether that's just a trend, because really it almost is like season to season the fashion industry decides we're into Scandinavian women now, and now we're into Ethiopian women, and it bothers me because it's something that, you know, even when I'm looking at models to put on our cover or inside of our fashion spreads, when I look at what the range is offered by the Canadian Modeling Agency, it is so small. Like there's literally, I would say, like Caucasian versus other skin colors, there's maybe like 95% white still at these agencies that you're dealing with. And then so you look there, and then if you want someone that isn't just a total like 0 or 2, they don't really exist in the agency or in any of the agencies. Coupled with the designers that are still making their sample sizes, which they present their clothes on the runway, they're seriously smaller than they've ever been. Like they don't fit. I've been on countless shoots where the model puts on the dress and it doesn't fit her, and she's a size 2. It like does not actually fit, where you're ripping the seams to get it on. And that's why the age gets younger and younger. So, you know, so what can we do to fight against this? I see some hope. Like I think when I was talking about American Eagle Outfitters, or even the new Diesel campaign has, they're using actually transgendered models. They're also using, they have a model that's handicapped in their ad. So even if those are being used as a marketing tool, I still think what it does is it challenges the fashion industry. And I feel like all it takes is a few kind of directional publications to make an effort and to try something new. So I really believe that as a new editor at Flair, I actually am challenged to do this, and I'm going to attempt to. You don't hold me to it in the next month, but yeah. But it's important to me. Like I honestly, like I grow tired of seeing models in every single shoot. I do, and you know, I would rather cast. It's so strange because in the industry we say real women, but it's like, well, aren't we all real? Like it's like, you know, like it's like we have to find real women, not models. But it's important to me that we represent across the board. And even in the models we choose, like we're going to make a point of choosing ones that maybe aren't the typical models of the moment.
So what do you think? I mean, you also cover this world in your work, and vaguely a little bit. Yeah, you know, in the fashion industry in general.
Well, it's hard. I don't know. I think I feel like I agree with a lot of what Cameron says. I think it's very hard because I've never worked in an editorial capacity in fashion magazines, and I think it's very difficult because, especially, I mean, we're also in Canada. Like we're not in an editorial role. You're not creating the world.
No.
You know what I mean? You're reflecting
somewhat,
it.
yeah.
I mean, I think back to I came of age in the mid-90s, and I read Sassy magazine, and that was like, it blew my mind because it was real girls,
Yeah.
and it was so out of step with all of the other magazines that I would read at that time, because it was like, make a skirt out of ties, and it was so inclusive, and I think, I mean, Cameron also mentioned kind of the use of transgender models in campaigns. Right now, Barney's has their huge season campaign is all transgender models, and transgender models with vastly different stories, and they're telling their own stories. Like there are these little mini documentaries, and I feel like there's more of a consciousness, I feel. Like I think that in the past, where there was a real kind of denial about like the sameness of what was happening in the industry, I don't know that the folks who are modeling in this campaign are necessarily, some of them are models and some of them are successful models right now. Some of them are just kind of real people who were brought into the campaign. They may not get tons and tons of editorial work after this or what have you, but the fact that there's this campaign that has these stunningly beautiful models who are not being cast as freaks at all and presenting their stories. I mean, even to have the stories behind the faces of these people who are modeling, to me, is remarkable because it's an acknowledgement that these are not just clothes horses, these are not just mannequins, these are real people. So, and those are kind of the beacons of hope for me, at least.
And I think one other thing that definitely is happening is because now everybody can have a filter or a special app on their phone or even on Instagram, you can change the settings so it sort of smooths everything out. What's happened though is every photographer has those tools, and I would say that retouching in the last few years, at least the publications that I've worked on, we've actually scaled back, and that's something that there's now like a retouched look that is not appealing, and for the more like kind of on trend magazines, it's not. Unless you're being super obvious about it because it's like almost like a digital portrait, which is like takes it to another level of an arty kind of feeling. But I would say like, it's important to see skin texture now. And there were I would say when the Photoshop started to kind of being used across the board, it started to be where like it would be a woman's face and you'd see two holes where the nose was, but there was no creases where there, like it was, and I've received images like that from photographers where it's just like, does this woman have pores or?
I saw an image of Miss Piggy recently.
Yeah, or an arm.
Had no nostrils.
Yeah. Sometimes you'll see an entire limb.
Oh yeah, they moved limbs and oh yeah, it's crazy. Yeah. So, and Flair was actually at a bit of controversy before me, but which was a Jennifer Lawrence. I don't know if it was actually in the news, but it was picked up by a lot of blogs, and then it came back again. And I'm like, come on, this was 2 years ago. I had nothing to do with it. But it was basically a picture of Jennifer Lawrence, and it was retouched, and it wasn't retouched to the level that I've seen some magazines do, but like it was noticeable, and they did a side by side, and so we have to be careful about those things because it's not hard for a photographer to release the unretouched image. So, I worry about that. I need to see the before and after, and if I see a major difference, it's like, forget it. Scale it back.
Well, I always think I have young children, and when I'm looking at magazines with my daughter, I feel like she's getting the most freakish conception of what women's bodies and faces look like.
Yeah, that's true.
And she's looked at me and said, "What is that?" I'm like, "It's a wrinkle." It's part of life. But I mean, if she was getting all her information from the media, she would never have seen one. And Jennifer, what about you? What do you think about sort of these images? In line with what's going on in the fashion industry and how they might alter our perceptions of beauty in media?
I agree with what the rest of the panel has been saying, but I think we should think about everything in terms of beauty and in terms of how women are being kind of visually presented in terms of their appearance in the media. But I think it also even moves beyond that and to consider not just how they are pictured in terms of their beauty, but in terms of what they're doing in the image. And are they pictured in a way that they're very passive, or their gaze is averted and they're just kind of being objectified in the image, or if they're pictured, with a male in the image, what is the dynamic of the relationship? Who's in control? Who's the more powerful person? Are the women pictured? Like sometimes I'll do this kind of experiment on a daily basis where I'll look at the kind of main page of the Golden Mail or whatever newspaper I'm reading, and look at how many pictures of women versus men are there, and what are the women doing in the images versus the men. It's usually very different. And so I think
Favor of women?
I think it's important to consider both how that we're being kind of depicted in terms of our beauty, but also what we're doing in the images, and that we're more than just things to kind of be perceived as attractive or beautiful or sexy, and that we're, you know, we're living, breathing people, and we lead active lives, and we're leaders, and we're powerful, and this kind of thing. And I think Cameron had touched on filters and Instagram, and I think the power of social media and everyone having in their hand a camera all day long, and just shifting demographics of Canada as well, I think will kind of push into the mainstream media a more diverse type of image and a more kind of diverse landscape of beautiful women.
Well, that was another question I had. I mean, are we really, I mean, you've cited a few examples, but are we actually seeing a rebellion against these conventional notions of beauty? I mean, it seems, you know, completely overt in this room. But I was also thinking about these makeup-free selfies that have been circulating in the last few weeks, or Lena Dunham showing her body. You know, if I can pick these things out of the air, I might hopefully call it a trend of some kind, but I am not really all that convinced. You know, so what do we make of these sort of fleeting moments of bodily acceptance? Is there a shift?
I think it might be, I think there's something there. There's kind of a stirring happening. But I think any one of those things can sometimes come across as, at least with the context of advertising, sometimes it can come across as a bit gimmicky. But I think that because the kind of power of who's creating images and who's sharing images is being kind of spread out a little bit more, it's not just magazines or newspapers. You know, we all can create images and share them with people, and even though we're each only sharing them with maybe 100 or a couple hundred people, we're all sharing those more realistic images of ourselves, and so I think that could really help to drive things towards more than something that's just a trend.
I mean, I kind of feel like I would like to think that we're moving forward. I feel like the reaction to Lena Dunham's body suggests to me that we're really not there yet. Like, especially because Lena Dunham has dealt with the reaction to her body with such grace and has not backed down. And I think, you know, is able to laugh at it, is able to be like, I would not have thought this way about myself. But I just think there's so much, like, the cultural anxiety and like the cultural recoiling from Lena Dunham's body, which looks pretty similar to a lot of bodies that we encounter, that we see in the world, that there was so much shock, and that, I mean, that she was called brave. Like, I feel like even all the torrents of praise on the other side, like that whole thing to me, and you're still talking about a straight, privileged white woman doing this. So I feel like, I don't know. I mean, I think we're probably better than we have been at various points, and worse than we have been at other points. And I don't know. I don't know that there's. I start to lose hope that there's going to be some kind of like tectonic cultural shift, because it would, you know, as we're talking about, you know, fashion magazines can only reflect this larger, more powerful system where, you know, that editorially we're enthralled to kind of the gods who are up there, you know, deciding who we get access to or what trends are or what have you. And we can choose what to report on. We can choose how to comment on things. Certainly I've read, you know, thousands of essays on Lena Dunham's body. So we're having discussions
that
about
isn't
them.
doing for us.
Well, that's what I wonder.
Yeah.
I know, because I feel like there's, like you're talking about Lena Dunham, and I feel like the same thing could be said about Orange is the New Black, where it's like, I know a lot of women and men that love Lena Dunham, love Orange is the New Black, but yet they're still going out and trying the goop cleanses, and they're buying the skin brightening creams, and they're booking themselves in for laser skin resurfacing. Like, so there's still this, like, I feel like, yes, there might be a shift, but I feel like it's going to take like decades before we even start thinking that these things are shocking. Like, to see a woman like Lena Dunham without top, because this perfection of beauty and is so ingrained in everyone's head because of what we've seen for decades and decades. Like, it's not new. It's been since, like, I don't know, like forever, really. Like, as soon as there's been a print magazine, something that's unattainable. So it's like, how do we get away from that? And I think really doing things like this project, I think, you know, trying different things in advertising, hoping that it's not just a trend and not just a fleeting moment.
Yeah, maybe we start there.
Yeah.
And on that note, well, we'd like to open it up to a conversation. If any of you in the audience have any questions for our panelists or any comments about your reactions to these powerful pictures in this room.
Oh, shy Canadians. Yes, please. I actually wrote a couple of years ago when I think I saw Barry at all. I think probably at the film festival. And then I discovered this and wrote to David J to request that I come here. So I thank you very much for making my wish come true. And I think what it did for me is I think it's very real and it's named appropriately because it is showing cancer's absolute reality. And for someone who has been touched by cancer, I have my best friend dead, my sister double mastectomy, I had a lumpectomy. So I've been really touched by this. And I think I was very pleased to see that it's out there because there are so many people these days with the pink ribbons and the runs and happy and all of that and those crazy videos that they're doing. And when I was diagnosed, I had a very good friend, a very well-educated woman, saying to me, well, it's not so bad, you'll get a good job, you know? So it's like, are you crazy? You know? So I think it's very important. And I think it's unbelievably brave of these ones to do this. And to show that, hey, people, this really is the reality of breast cancer. You know? And we don't need any more things to happen. So I kind of agree with it.
You didn't have to.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yes.
I think that fascinating conversation. This work is stunning. But interestingly enough, I came over uptown by myself, from uptown, because I couldn't find someone that was interested enough to come with me to see it. And through my, it's like they're screaming, and you're, don't want to, like, ooh, I don't want to see that. I'm a registered nurse, and I still work, I don't do bedside nursing, but I still work in healthcare. So I'm very drawn, obviously to this type of, I see this being like a hospital exhibit. I could see this making patients feel wonderful and better. But when you talk about magazines, I mean, I'm an old doll already, but when you talk about the consciousness out there, this conversation correlates to the whole anti-aging movement. This is not what sells, if you want advertisers for your magazines, and it's very nice that Barney's doing this, expose, but it's probably because a reaction to, they had some issues about a couple of black people that were taken away by security because they didn't think they could share a credit card. So that's again for racism, and not because they're so, open and out there. It's not what sells. And so if you look at the whole cosmetic anti-aging movement, especially for boomers and, my generation, there's way too much money in that for this consciousness to surface in any way that you'd like to see. They say it's going to be about a $300 billion industry by 2050 or something. I do healthcare broker products and stuff. I work with everybody possible internationally, and it's not what sells. So it's not what sells products, it's not what sells beer, it's not what sells
Breast cancer.
breast cancer. Exactly, right. Of course. I mean, everybody, I'm friends with, Marla Shapiro personally, it's very nice to come out, they've had a double mastectomy and they've had reconstructive surgery, and that's also becoming almost a bit of a trend. I know a couple of women who've done it already because they're positive for the gene. But that's again, that's the medical establishment, how they see things, and they're the whole burn and cut. Medicaid cut mentality. It's not necessarily, it's a very small controversial issue. Yeah, they're all jumping on it, everybody's jumping on it. So it's, in terms of your industry, it's not what's happening, I think it's a lot of ways to think.
Well, it sort of relates to that. So one of your questions was about, whether this kind of exhibit could have existed 20 years ago. We brought this to the city 20 years ago. And it was about 20 years ago that the New York Times magazine ran a cover of a woman who's a model and a photographer. It's a self-portrait, and she's wearing an asymmetrical dress. And the one side of the dress is cut very low, and it reveals her chest that's been flattened and scarred from a mastectomy. And that image and that cover created a lot of controversy at that time. And I don't think until the SCAR project has come along, there's been something that has been in the public eye that way. And I think maybe their experience with running that image may have made people kind of shy away from using that kind of imagery.
Well, usually, when we see the breasts in media, it's they're sexualized, right? And this is a disease that hits women in their, sexual parts and their reproductive organs. And when you're sort of studying how bodies and health imagery is projected into media, what have you seen of kind of, human bodies that are damaged?
Yeah, actually they're usually never shown as damaged.
Even if they are.
If it's an article about breast cancer, the woman, maybe she's had reconstruction, or she's wearing a bra to make it look as though her breasts are
There's
intact.
emphasis on reconstruction.
Yeah,
you can skip the disease part and go right to reconstruction.
Yeah, one of the studies I did, it was a 5-year time span on Canadian women's fashion magazines and sort of women's general interest magazines, and in all that time of breast cancer coverage, there were 0 images of scars, and so obviously all of those women would have some scars, and usually there were kind of not even women who have had like their hair loss. So that the pictures in the magazines were usually the women before they had breast cancer, often even when they were much younger, or after they've had breast cancer, when their hair is back and their makeup's on and they're happy. And so not kind of not what we're saying here.
So we erase the story.
Yeah, I think that's the problem, because everybody's running around saying, I'm a survivor, and then they even see me, I mean, everybody goes, oh, you look great, and I wonder, how many people have seen this exhibit? Like,
I think online, probably a lot of people have seen it a lot more, and the whole Facebook controversy has really actually helped. I don't know if you guys know, they posted on Facebook, it gets taken down, then they promise David that they're not going to take it down again, and then it gets taken down, because basically Facebook takes it down if there's one complaint. I was under the impression it was algorithm-based, but it's not. If they get a complaint, and they got a complaint, and they take it down. So I think a lot of people have seen it that way, but it's only shown in a few cities. It's only been to New York, Cincinnati, Houston, and I think that's it. And now
The film has reached a lot of
the
people.
film has gone everywhere.
I think the comment about survivorship, I mean, that's something that was one of the reasons we wanted to bring this here. And I think in the media there is so much about survivorship, and in the breast cancer community we all want to talk about the successful survivorship. But what we see on the front lines are women really struggling after treatment. So it's not like, you're done treatment, get back to work, this is great, let's celebrate. I mean, what Shauna does, who's here, is help women she's on the front lines helping women, and it doesn't even hit them until they're actually done treatment that this is their reality, and they have emotional scars as well as the physical scars that they're really needing a lot of support and help with. So there's something about these photos that I find, they definitely show the physical scars, but he did such an amazing job of capturing the emotion as well. And so that's also why we wanted to bring this.
Yeah, and the other thing I wanted to say is, we've come a long way, we brought it here, it's in a gallery, in the safety of a gallery. I think our dream was to wrap buses in it and have posters like the Mervish posters along University. And I know when we had a meeting with a very big media company, I won't mention the name, and they were really excited, and then when they actually saw the image, or even, you know, the image of the woman who's pregnant over here, they kind of, you know, recoiled. So I do think, you know, as much as like we've come far, there's still a long way to go in terms of people really promoting the images. And I know, like, for myself, I had a lot of friends say to me, like, when I talked about having it on the side of the bus, you know, well, what if my daughter saw that, or what if my child, you know, and I think it's just such a, well, yeah, there's that, and like, it's such an opportunity to start dialogue, and, you know, at a very young age with children, about not even breast cancer, but about difference, and people in the world who have differences. So
one thing that I think is important to add in, like, I'm really enjoying the placing of the context of it as being bigger than just breast cancer. I think it's really important. It reminds me a lot of, you know, handicapped activism. 30, 40 years ago, we didn't have cut curbs, you know, and now everyone's benefiting because they can skateboard up a curb, you know, now, or whatever. But now, I mean, I think it's really important to be positioned in that way, that it's something, the conversation is going to benefit everybody, and, you know, and we're, you know, I'm an eternal optimist, but we're really lucky, you know, in the last 15 years that we do have some control now on disseminating images that don't have to be attached to commerce. You know, so I think we need to make those choices wisely as what we choose to disseminate, and, you know, and I think having the personal stories attached to them is very important.
I know we had some questions over here, or comments.
I just was after what Shauna was saying about the idea of looking at these pictures, what do we see as beautiful, and maybe trying to separate it from commerce as well, because I think that really complicates things. If we try and put these actual images into the context of what we're buying in magazines, it doesn't work. Our eyeballs aren't accustomed to seeing this yet. So that, as you were saying, I mean, it's going to take a long time, but I think it's also important to actually look at the pictures and examine the ways that we react to them, because what's beautiful in commerce, or what we want to buy, and what we look at in art and see is beautiful is not the same thing. And what we see in art often is absence, and that's what's beautiful. And I think we haven't spent much time actually talking about the images, and I think that was just the point that I wanted to draw on a little, which was that part of what makes these, and what we're talking about is beauty, part of what we see is something that is different, and it is the absence that makes them beautiful. And I think it's hard for us to talk about that, especially when we get caught up in the commercial aspect of beauty. It's harder, it's an easier conversation to have in the context of art than it is in the context of commerce.
Well, I know you didn't get the bus wraps, but I feel like I've seen those posters everywhere.
Yes.
Yeah, we had a hard time. There was a few places where we had them in restaurants and they got taken down, and we had them in a few other places, and, you know,
but we got a massive billboard on the garden.
Exactly. We have generous people, and then we have people who are more fearful. Like, we get a lot of free stuff too, right? So you know, we have to go with what they go with, and you know, some people were nervous.
Yeah.
Some people were just nervous, and I understand that, because there's a lot of cultural differences, and you know, there's people, they're nervous, but the whole point for us is, you know, we've talked about it a million times, of just that, like, maybe 20, and you know, you say 20 years ago, well, 20 years from now, you know, will this be shocking? Right? And our hope is that it
Hopefully it is, because as many women won't be diagnosed.
exactly, yeah, but that we will accept difference, and we will, and especially for the young women with breast cancer, that they can accept themselves as well, right? As lots do, but some women struggle with that.
Well, it was interesting to see these artistic images in that more commercial space, though, like next to a McDonald's poster, you know, and you were seeing that.
Yeah.
You know, let's talk about the environmental impact of it.
Yeah.
I think there was a couple more.
Yeah,
sorry.
Yeah, no, but I'm taking us away from sort of what Nancy was saying, but it does maybe tie in, because I think there's a larger, you know, there's been a spate of books all about, you know, women and, you know, about perfection. about being the perfect mother, and like, you know, Sheryl Sandberg's book about leaning in and doing more, and then the reaction to that. There, even survivorship is, there's an aspect of being a perfect survivor, right? Like that you have to do cancer well too. Like not only do you have to be a good mother and a good, you know, whatever you're doing in your life, you have to be a good cancer survivor, right? So the good cancer survivor is the brave face and is good patient, and who doesn't, and the pain and all that passivity that is implied by that pain and sort of infantilized. And the thing about these images is that they are adults and they are women and who are powerful in their imperfect struggle, whatever. And I think that that's that larger dialogue about something about having to do, that women are everywhere being tired by having to do it all so well and just can't anymore, right?
And I think there was in that film Valley, Amy, one of the women in that film, said that she didn't feel so much as a survivor as she was trying to survive, right? I think there's a lot of difficult people that way.
Again, it's that war language, it's something that's even projected in the military onto our daily life. Yes, so one of the thoughts, I'm a two-time cancer survivor, breast cancer survivor, and many thoughts went through my mind as I walked through it. And the scars, I looked at the scars, and yes, the scars are ugly, but you move away from the scars to the face. Like the scars is not what captivates you, it's the face. Because you see the scars, but you're not drawn only to the scars, because your eyes move from the scars. One of the thoughts that hit me was, this is a must-see exhibit. It's not a choose to see. It's a must-see. And I don't know how you bring it to be seen, but it's a must-see. Whether it's in the schools, whether it's a CBC program, but it's a must-see. It's not something that you can hide anymore. It's like the days when HIV wasn't out there, the days when a disabled person couldn't go into a restaurant, when somebody without legs couldn't be looked at. This is life. The statistics are that 1 in 8 women, or less, because you have a nurse who can attest to that, will have breast cancer. So you're standing in a shopping mall or in a checkout line in a supermarket. You may be the woman like that, or 2 or 3 other women in that line are like you, like that. So, and then I looked at it, it sort of hit you many ways, because I looked at the scars, and every single scar is different. So I said, which surgeons did which scars?
We had actually a session 2 nights ago with a panel talking about reconstruction, and we asked that. We asked the surgeon, Shauna asked her, that, or no, you asked.
Yeah.
Because we thought the scars are so different, and she said that's actually a very realistic representation of, we thought, is there socioeconomic differences, because some seem to be well done, some look really harsh, but she said it's actually a very realistic depiction of what's out there.
Some of the emotions that you go through, and I think somebody who has had cancer maybe sees it differently than somebody who is just seeing an exhibit, or somebody whose spouse has had cancer, or, because men, actually when I first came in, I thought that one was male. But I knew fundamentally it wasn't, because the article didn't say there were any males. But males have breast cancer, right? So I just had so many different feelings, going through. But my strongest feeling is that everybody, this has to be seen, it can't be not seen.
Thank you.
The thing is that women are the largest consumers of healthcare in North America. They also represent $14 billion of an $18 billion marketplace. So we do need to use our voices for something like this. These women are speaking to us through their photos, through their soul coming out of their eyes. And we need to not be silent. If if we believe it needs to be seen, then we need to collectively put our voices together and have it seen. Have this discussion on TVO or PBS or, major cities in North America to where the pink ribbon represents a market of marketing you all kinds of chemicals that are part of this origin of this disease. And we're going ahead and buying them instead of saying, no, I'm going to speak with my pocketbook to prevent this in my child, my grandchild, my friend. So sometimes in healthcare, because I'm a nurse practitioner and OB/GYN, women don't recognize the power they have. And they say, oh, well, I couldn't do that. No, you don't have to do it alone. But collectively, the magazines that you represent have to represent us, not just this little margin of you've got to look cute and you've got to look perfect. We're feeding that by buying all these things, and we're not objecting to it.
And I think on that call to action, I think we're gonna end our evening here. I just want to say thank you to you guys. What an excellent discussion. Going on, and if you want to get the SCAR product, somebody, honestly, David J is doing so much of this out of pocket. Find a sponsor to purchase this and shop it around the world and put it in every hospital, every research facility, every institution around the world so it can be seen. If you really want to do that, help him out, because he's struggling and he really wants it to be seen. So thank you all for coming. Thank you all for being a part of this evening. It's really important to us.